I'm national correspondent Kayla Gaskins in Washington. As the world's attention focuses on Israel and Iran's fight, some are raising concerns China could take advantage of the moment to make a move for Taiwan. For decades, China has eyed Taiwan, waiting and planning for the right moment to assert control and reunify the island with mainland China.
We need to be watching what's going on in Taiwan.
Some experts worry China might get the idea that now is a good time for such a move.
I believe that this is the most delicate situation in the entire world right now,
as the world's attention concentrates on the Middle East.
Please be watchful what China is doing.
NATO's Secretary General urging attention be paid to China's military expansions.
China itself also rapidly building up its armed forces to levels we have never ever seen before. So the international security situation has changed dramatically.
Earlier this month, the Chinese Navy conducting unprecedented drills in the Pacific involving 2 of their aircraft carriers. Taiwan's vice president pointing out an aggressive China is not just a Taiwan problem.
Again, raise that it's not only around Taiwan. They are all over the South China Sea. They're to the north, around Japan.
Meanwhile, as China flexes its naval might in the region, the Israel-Iran war prompting the United States to move the Nimitz aircraft carrier and strike group out of Asia and to the Middle East. China, although friendly with Iran, has not come to their aid, likely because it's not in China's interest for the conflict to escalate further, especially as Iran threatens to close the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil passes through that waterway.
China's limited. They don't want the Straits of Hormuz closed because that's where they rely on the bulk of their energy. Most of their oil comes from Iran. So what they don't want is an escalation that leads Israel to strike oil refineries.
Beijing is watching President Trump's every move regarding Israel and Iran to better understand his sometimes hard to predict foreign policy approach. Notes China will take into consideration when making decisions about Taiwan. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
Joining us to discuss, Chinese Communist Party expert Dr. Gordon Chang. And obviously, the NATO summit and the conflict in the Middle East is hanging over that right now. The NATO Secretary General expressed a concern over China's military buildup around Taiwan. How could what the U.S. does next with all of the international conflicts right now impact what China does?
I think it could impact 2 ways. One of them is that the Chinese can see that the United States is bogged down in the Middle East, and they may believe that they have open season on Taiwan or the Philippines. In the last couple days, starting June 19th, China started to pressure Taiwan in its airspace with these 74 flights going very close to Taiwan, 61 of them across the median line, in other words, into Taiwan airspace. Yeah, I think, though, that the Chinese look at what occurred and probably will be deterred. I take that view because President Trump clearly will do what he says he will do. And I think the Chinese looked at that and said they just don't want to take him on. They've had so many previous American presidents who said one thing and never followed through, but Trump followed through.
So is it your opinion that we're kind of in this, or they're kind of in this wait and see mode, or how big of a possibility of China acting on Taiwan do you see? I mean, could we be looking at soon the next war in East Asia?
Well, we could always be looking at the next war in East Asia, and it's not just Taiwan. I think there's a bigger risk of war against the Philippines. Because also in the last 3 days, we saw these more than 50 maritime militia ships of China swarming Iroquois Reef of the Philippines in the South China Sea. Beijing is engaged in some very belligerent activities against the Philippines. Some of them may be even constituting acts of war. So they could be anywhere, Didi, not just Taiwan. And then again, there are provocative Chinese activities against South Korea, Japan, and the faraway Australia. So anywhere along this periphery is a danger point for the world.
You mentioned some key allies here. The president touting the pledge to hike defense spending among NATO members. As I mentioned, that ongoing, the summit right now. What message do you think that sends to China?
I think that it shows political will, which is something that the Chinese need to see. You know, during President Trump's first term, he pushed NATO in the right direction in terms of spending. He's got a lot more work to do, but we're seeing progress. And that is not only a message to China, but to China's good friend, Russia, because Russia has been pressuring not just Ukraine with the war, but also going after the Baltics and Poland with provocative activities. So this is an assault on NATO as well as Ukraine.
As we look at, I mean, we mentioned the possibility, and you said that there's always the threat of a war in East Asia. I'm curious about what this would mean for the U.S. What does the Taiwan Relations Act mean for our commitment should there be a war?
Well, our commitment is to basically make sure that Taiwan has military equipment that it needs to defend itself. We have not been very good in meeting that commitment because we've been slow walking arms sales. And also, we have not been selling to Taiwan what it really needs. It really needs submarines. And of course, it needs cruise missiles. And we have been very reluctant to supply those things. We've been selling them stuff that, F-16s, which might not survive the first half hour of a war. But clearly, when we have troops on the ground in Taiwan, as we have some advisors, that sends a message to Beijing that we've got a tripwire there, just like we have a tripwire in South Korea with our troops in the Republic of Korea.
Well, speaking of key resources, oil, one of them, and one of the world's most contested waterways, the Strait of Hormuz, has become front and center with the conflict in the Middle East, but also closing the strait would hurt China. How could that closure, explain to us how that could choke the economy of one of Iran's allies, China?
Well, 50% of China's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. So if it's closed off, China then runs out of oil eventually, probably has to draw down its strategic petroleum reserve, which it certainly doesn't want to do because it's been building it up in preparation for war. But also what it does is it rocks global oil markets, and that hurts China as well. So the psychological impact is also great.
Yeah, countries globally watching this. Dr. Gordon Chang, it's always an interesting discussion. Thank you for joining us on the National News Desk.
Thank you, Dee Dee.